Hello, everybody. It is November 6th, indeed a very historic day after the election yesterday, which happily was not close or not that close. We know the results. We know that Kamala Harris, otherwise known as Liz and Dick Cheney, puppet of the British Empire and the neocons, was defeated, and that we have an incoming president, Donald Trump, who has promised to end the forever wars and who has a rather interesting coalition with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., Tulsi Gabbard, and others. Unfortunately, we also see that AIPAC and these multinational billionaire corporations have an out of size role. Miriam Adelson's money is too influential, and we are going to have to fight very hard to get a shift in our policy to stop the genocide in Gaza, although Trump has said he wants Netanyahu to end the war. But what exactly that means remains to be seen. Also, I do not think it was particularly promising that Space Force decided to launch a missile, a Minuteman III a routine test, which just coincidentally happened in the middle of counting the votes at 2:00 a.m. Eastern time. I'm not so sure that was just a coincidence and clearly is a warning. Now, on my vote, I guess I should just talk a little bit about that. I want to thank everybody who mobilized. I know so many of you did. And I do have to say that I don't think 0.5%, which never once went up or down by a percentage during the entire counting, is actually accurate. But then we know the record of New York State and their election shenanigans. So we'll find out more about that. I would say the bigger crime in these elections is the censorship and silencing, as we saw with the Gillibrand-Sapircone debate, where neither one of them could argue for enough weapons to Israel to let Israel do whatever it wants, including striking Iran. Or when they both said, including Sapircone, the nominal Republican nominee, that he would not support Donald Trump negotiating an end to the Russia-Ukraine conflict if it included Ukraine having to cede any territory. And I presume he means including even Crimea, which has had a referendum and voted overwhelmingly to rejoin the Russian Federation and has a naval base, Sevastopol, which has been Russian since the time of Catherine the Great. So there wasn't a dime's worth of difference between the two U.S. Senate candidates from New York, incumbent Kirsten Gillibrand and Republican Mike Sapircone, and therefore they could not afford to allow me to participate in that debate. But with your help, I did succeed now twice in getting well over the 45,000 signatures required to get on the ballot, and therefore I know and they know that my voice is serious and substantial, and I have a great deal of support in the state of New York. Now, as far as what the Trump election means, I think we have to move very, very boldly to ensure that he, one, does not bring people like Mike Pompeo into his new administration, that Jared Kushner, unfortunately, is playing an outsized role, and he is quite a nasty piece of work. We have to ensure that he keeps his promise that he made publicly with Robert Kennedy Jr. to release the files on the Kennedy assassination. And obviously, something that most of us are interested in is perhaps he will clean up this election mess in the United States so we can have fair elections, so that qualified candidates such as myself, Jose Vega, Dennis Kucinich, and others actually get equal coverage, equal time, and an ability to reach the voters. Now, that being said, I want to tell you that going back to this Minuteman missile test and the war danger, We have now a period of transition, which I think is very dangerous, and I think we have to identify who the enemy of our republic actually is. And I want to share with you a report that was published of a meeting of the British House of Lords in May of 2019. Remember, Donald Trump was still president in 2019. And here is the title of the report: UK Foreign Policy in a Shifting World Order. I strongly recommend that all of you read this. May 21st, 2019. It was in this report that various of the lords, and these are comments of different lords in the House of Lords, made the argument that they could not afford a re-election of Donald Trump because it would disrupt the US-UK special relationship. And when you read this report, you realize that these elites, and imagine having a House of Lords anyways, how archaic. And I have to also needle all of you Americans who are so fascinated with the British royalty and monarchy. Really, please cut it out. We had a revolution against that, and we were correct. Here are some choice quotes from this report, and I think it may give you some insights as to what we are actually up against and why the 250th anniversary of the founding of our republic is something which should be widely celebrated and an opportunity for revival of our constitutional principles. So, from this report, quote, "These developments are shaking to the core the assumptions on which our foreign policy has been predicated for the last 70 years, and the assumptions on which the rules-based order in the conduct of international relations and affairs has been based. Neither giant country has accepted things as they were. For example, all the key multilateral institutions of the previous century are now looked at critically by the White House, i.e., the Trump White House. This is 2019. I am told that the president, Trump, asks his team every morning why the USA is still a member of the World Trade Organization and still in NATO. Well, bless his soul, I think Donald Trump was absolutely right about that, but you see the British freaking out. Next. And here's another comment from another lord. Obviously, there was Saddam's invasion of Kuwait. Remember, by the way, this is an aside from me, our ambassador, April Glaspie, gave him, in effect, permission to do that. We set it up and orchestrated it, and Margaret Thatcher flew over here on her broomstick and then used her broomstick to straighten Bush Sr.'s spine and get him to go to this war, which was totally unnecessary. Based on lies. Remember, the babies being pulled out of the incubators never happened. So, back to the House of Lords. Obviously, there was Saddam's invasion of Kuwait, which more or less coincided with the collapse of the Soviet Union. The world was able to adjust to the end of an enormous Russian empire that had started to build up at the time of Agincourt and had collapsed effectively over about 3 months in a tolerably peaceful way. The rules-based order seemed to exist in our relationship then. I had the pleasure of dealing with Mr. Dick Cheney, who is now called Mr. Vice, but was an extremely distinguished defense secretary. He went on to other things. At that time, our relationship with the United States was an absolute model. We cooperated with 36 other countries under full United Nations resolutions to deal with the problem of Saddam's illegal occupation of Kuwait. How do you like that? So the Brits are crowing about a war which they themselves helped to orchestrate, and they are saying that Dick Cheney, the endorser and supporter of Kamala Harris, was their ideal partner. Please let that sink in. And we shall go on from this 2019 House of Lords report. And this is, I put his name because it was so explicit, Lord Kerr of Kinlochard. He says, however, I missed the biggest threat. I did not spot that the greatest challenge to the rules-based system would come from its greatest beneficiary, America. Now, I had no idea that our country was the great. Do you feel like you've benefited greatly from the rules-based system of the British Empire? I thought we had a revolution against them, but let's see here. President Trump does not want to reform the institutions. He does not like them. He does not like rules, not if they might bind America. And then there's a long skip. 20 years ago, the Commonwealth countries took us seriously because we were fighting their corner in Brussels and winning. The Americans took us seriously because more enlightened administrations then supported the EU enlargement process, on which we were leading in Brussels and succeeding. Brussels, and remember this is NATO and EU, took us seriously because it was believed that we could bring the Americans along, and sometimes we did. My successors must know that if one pillar of the mutually reinforcing tripod collapses, the others crack too. John Bolton cheers and the Kremlin smirks. I don't know why they wouldn't love John Bolton. That's a little questionable to me. But global Britain shrinks. It is not too late to stop the march of, oops, and I can't see that quote, of something of the diminishment of global Britain, I believe. And I hope that we will. Okay, so there you have it from the British House of Lords, May of 2019. That outlook is the enemy of the United States and our republic. That is what we are up against today. And I hope that President-elect Donald Trump is very aware of the perfidy and treason of the British. People may remember Lord Kim Darroch, the ambassador to the United States, who said he wanted to flood the zone around Trump to get him to go to war with Iran. Happily, we didn't have that war then. We are millimeters away from such a war now under the Biden administration. J.D. Vance and Trump have both said that they don't think it's in our interest to have a war with Iran, but will the British goad their little hand grenade Bibi Netanyahu into provoking it? I don't know. So I would like to say we have a moment of opportunity. Americans must not let down our guard. Do not sit back and celebrate the defeat of Dick Cheney, aka Kamala Harris. The Trump administration is a very mixed array of people, and it is up for us to be heard. If we can preserve freedom of speech, which I think he wants to do, then that is very important because we will have more of a voice. But we have to face the fact that the world is in transition. It's not just the United States, and I think that's a good thing. Billions of people are rejecting colonialism. You have a process of the BRICS nations, which really is an echo of what Lyndon LaRouche set out to do with his International Development Bank in 1975. And we, the United States, if we were true to the principles in our Declaration of Independence and Constitution, rather than trying to crush and antagonize that, would be joining it and would be playing a leading role as a major agro-industrial superpower. So please join me. I am not going anywhere. I'm not running away. We are going to escalate on the needed policies. We are going to denounce those things that are wrong, and we hopefully will succeed in getting through this transition period to the inauguration of President Donald Trump and the end of all of these forever wars.